Good evening, everybody. Today we have with us Shamara Wettimuny. Uh, she's a doctoral student in the University of Oxford. She has a BSc and MSc in International Relations and History from London School of Economics. And she's a former research associate at Verite Research. Uh, Here, research has always focused on religious violence, uh, and also peace building and in the Sri Lankan political economy. Uh, so, Shamara, I'm so happy to have you today.
Thank you.
I hope you're doing well. I don't think you are locked down like us. You have a little bit of freedom to move about in Oxford, I gather.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I go straight to my first question. You see, you would have been following what was happening in Sri Lanka. When the first reports came out into the media about COVID-19 patients, some of the mainstream media kind of used this uh, to say that the first few patients were of a particular ethnic group, ethnic and religious group, and they went on to say that they are purposely kind of infecting people. And this was picked up uh, by other social media, picked up by various groups. So we see this often in a crisis. Last year we had this during the April bombings. We see this often fake news, misinformation, and leading to hate speech. So my question is, I think you would have studied this extensively. My question is, as civil society, how do we, grapple with this? What advice would you give? How to counter this type of fake news, this type of misinformation?
So first, what I would say is while we are seeing a lot of this hate speech and misinformation on platforms like social media, it's very often mainstream media outlets that are actually carrying a lot of these news and sometimes even releasing the first examples of, ethnicizing these patients and uh, adding to the conspiracy theories around who is spreading the virus in particular. And this is deeply problematic. It's a reflection of a broader problem we have in Sri Lanka right now with regard to journalism, ethics in journalism. Now, hate speech is not something new. The targeting of particular minority communities is not new, and neither is the scapegoating of these communities when, particularly in times of crisis. I would be careful about trying to comment too much about what's happening right now. So I think it's better if I try and frame this in terms of my research and what I'm studying in depth. Basically, in the late 19th century and early 20th century, in the lead up to the 1915 anti-Muslim riots, for years prior, it wasn't just a short thing, it was for years prior, we had a lot of hate speech. And of course, back then, there was no such thing as social media. In fact, it was on the front pages of a lot of newspapers. Now, the problem was the British colonial state that was governing Ceylon, as we were called at that time, had little interest actually in those sorts of local affairs. They weren't actually monitoring the news, and not so much out of a capacity issue. I just think they had their priorities elsewhere than in monitoring ethnic tensions or communal tensions. So what happened was that these anti-minority and in this particular context anti-Muslim tropes were actually being widely published in newspapers dating back to 1885. The riots took place in 1915. The point is, the state, when the riots erupted in 1915, were actually largely taken unawares at the scale of the violence. They didn't see it coming in the shape and form that it eventually did erupt. Now, today we have a very different state. We also have this kind of hate speech and misinformation spreading doubly fast, in a sense, because of a platform, because of technology like social media. And yes, so there is some what we can say we've learned from history is that you actually do need to counter these narratives. If you leave them unaddressed, you risk allowing them to simmer, allowing them to gain traction. And when push, and in the context of some crisis, then it has erupted into violence. So, which is why I would say that I think it is important for civil society, where possible, to try and counter these narratives. Now, I don't have a solution for you in how they should do it, but I think there is no one size fits all policy or response you can have. Even across social media, the different platforms, take Twitter, for example, you would need a different strategy to counter the sort of speech that's taking place there compared to, say, Facebook, where you have a different nature of, and sometimes more overt, um, propaganda or anti-minority rhetoric. And so you need to be able to respond to these different things, different versions of speech and misinformation, depending on the platform or the operating environment you're in.
So you need some kind of a group that comes up with a communication strategy, very thought of strategy, and look at different mediums, address different mediums, because the audiences and educational levels, the interests are different. The tone that is used in those particular mediums are different. So I get your point, what you're saying, that you have to look at it very strategically and in a broad basis.
Yeah, because you can, in certain fora, you can respond using normative values and appealing to, values of peace, coexistence, harmony. In other spaces, you may have to appeal to more pragmatic values. Look, if you do this, we risk, there is a toll on our economy. We see it right now. It's only going to get worse. You're not going to be able to control who is affected by this kind of fallout. So yeah, you do have to.
Do you see in a post-corona situation, COVID situation, do you see a possibility that, there will be a kind of new social norm where people, after, let's say, in communities, they are connected particularly in urban setting, you are connected to your neighbors, and you have gone through a crisis or situation together. Now, for instance, after 1915, we had the malaria, you had the war, you had the malaria epidemic in Sri Lanka. Then communities got together and there was this whole struggle for independence. And I tend to think that for a long time, of course, we had this ethnic strife and violence with the Tamil communities, between Tamil and the Sinhalese. But that for a long time, there were not conflicts between the Sinhalese and the Muslims, because probably, the communities kind of meshed together because they were trading together, whatever. Do you see a possibility? Can you give us a kind of some message of hope as a historian looking back? Whether after post-corona, whether there will be little room in society for little tolerance for anti-Muslim or anti-Hindu or anti-Christian kind of sentiments.
Sure. So I think what I would start off by saying is, look, Sri Lanka is an enormously resilient society. We have endured some horrific, from atrocities to natural disasters. I think of the tsunami. I think of just Easter Sunday, which took place almost a year ago to date.
Yeah.
And rather than focusing on the negatives, I can think of the generosity, the kindness, the first things that happened last year when the Easter Sunday bombings took place was that people were just rushing to blood banks to donate, and that kind of selflessness we can be so proud of, and I think we're still seeing a lot of that today. People are going out of their way to donate to those who are in need, that going out of their way to try and figure out ways to help daily wage earners. And there is always a positive angle we can look at, and so yes, I hope this the levels of camaraderie and support and good neighborliness, love thy neighbor, in whatever. I hope it continues, because COVID is different. It's also, we don't know how long it's going to be around for. It's not an explosion that takes place on one day and then we have relative calm or security after that. So yes, this is, and again, the tsunami, it was horrendous, and the death toll is
But it was
incomparable to
just
what.
one event,
But it was one event, and then life goes back to normal and we adjust. We are going to have to adjust to life post COVID, but we don't know how soon post COVID will be. So yes, I think we have to remember that we're in this together. It's a commonly used trope, but the reality is the virus doesn't see religion, race, ethnicity. It doesn't see class or income. And so we really are all in this together. And I mean, I don't want to dismiss things like how poverty and inequality and inability to access good healthcare may mean that you are more susceptible or vulnerable. Of course, these things all apply, but the point is,
but then again, in Sri Lanka, we have a good healthcare system, right? At the village level, we have PHI officers, we have nurses, we have attendants, we have this.
And we're creating new leaders and new heroes for us. The healthcare workers in Sri Lanka at the moment are just doing a fantastic job, as far as I can tell. I know I'm not there at the moment, but they're out there risking their lives on the front lines for us. And these are the sort of things we should be focusing on, embracing, and remembering that we're all in this together.
Anyway, thank you so much, Shamara, for joining us and sharing your thoughts. It has been a very pleasing interview. It's very nice to connect with you once again.
Thank you.
Wish you all the luck. Finish your studies without much interruptions. So until we see you again when you return to Sri Lanka on your holidays, we do not know when, but hopefully soon. Take care. All the best, and
thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you, and same to you. Good night.
Good night.